Hello, my name is Andrew Gommesen, and it is my privilege to be joining you once again as the host of the Culture Watch podcast. This podcast is an outreach of Speaking for Him, and I'm so thankful that you are listening or watching, and I hope that this episode will be a benefit to you, and that if it is, you will share it with your family and friends. I just wanted to say off the top here that I really do appreciate feedback, and my hope would be that this show would become even more interactive as we go. And so I want to encourage you that if you would like to share any feedback with me, that you contact me with the contact information at the end of the show. And particularly, if you would leave me a voicemail with the link on my blog to do that, that would be a really great way for this show to get more interactive. I would love to answer questions or to comment on a news story you're thinking about, or to hear your comments on the news stories that I talk about. Any way that you want to interact with the show is a way that I would like to hear from you, so please keep that in mind. And again, I'm so thankful to everyone who listens. Please keep sharing the show. That's how more people can find out about what is going on. It's on all major podcast platforms, and now it is available each week on YouTube. So please continue to interact with me. I really do appreciate it. With that being said, let's get into news for the week of April 20th. So today we're going to start out our news coverage by talking about a recent report that came out from the Trump DOJ about how the Biden DOJ mishandled dealings with pro-lifers.
The Department of Justice releasing a bombshell report on the weaponization of government. It claims the Biden Justice Department, led by former Attorney General Merrick Garland, weaponized the law to target pro-life defendants and tried to give them longer prison sentences. And that includes the case of pro-life activist Mark Houck. The father of 7 was charged with obstructing access to an abortion clinic. A SWAT team of more than a dozen people raided his home, arresting him in front of his children. He faced up to 11 years in prison. A jury later acquitted him. You'll remember we covered this story, and here he is on America's Newsroom after that.
Look, I'm a pro-lifer, and I've been a pro-lifer. I've been an activist for 20 plus years, and we all know what happened. But the federal government did come after me with the full force of the law, and raided my home on September 23rd as a response to that. And here we are, 4 months after that raid, vindicated, hopefully, with no issue with appeal.
And we remember that well. Well, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche is with us here. Thank you so much for being here.
Morning.
I want to put a couple statistics here. Average 26.8 months for pro-life defendants versus 12.3 months for pro-abortion offenders. And this from a Biden official, former Biden official, saying the Civil Rights Division brought law enforcement leaders, crisis pregnancy center representatives, faith leaders, and reproductive health care staff together to address the real violence, threats of violence, and obstruction that too many people face in our country when it comes to reproductive health care. We enforce the law even-handedly and put public safety at the center of this work. I imagine you disagree with that.
I do, and I disagree not because it's just my opinion. I disagree because of the work that we did over the past year at the department, understanding what happened that led to these completely inappropriate results. And prosecutors have a big say in sentencings in the federal system. The judge ultimately imposes sentence, but what we saw is prosecutors arguing for really harsh sentences, inconsistent with what they should have been doing and inconsistent with what they were arguing when it was exactly the opposite. And we saw internal emails, internal correspondence, which is now part of the report, where Department of Justice prosecutors are working hand in hand with NGOs and nonprofits to target and go after pro-life individuals who were not breaking the law.
Right.
Okay? And I'll tell you what, there's no emails in my inbox from NGOs telling me what to do. And it's disappointing. And look, I hope the American people can see the work that we did over the past year, trying to understand what happened. But once they see it, I think folks will be frustrated and disappointed.
I went through it. What did the Biden team have to gain by giving members of Planned Parenthood information about pro-lifers?
It's a great question. I mean, the only thing they had to gain from the Department of Justice perspective is it helped their agenda, the Department of Justice's agenda at the time, which was to single-handedly target one group over another. So this isn't saying, let's go after drug dealers, or let's go after robbers or murderers. They're saying, let's go after individuals who are pro-life. Okay, that's what they were doing. And a lot of folks, including you all, reported on it and called out that it looked like it was happening. But until we had an opportunity to go back and look at the records and the emails and what we had internally, which is what we did the past year, it was hard to kind of put meat behind that, which we've done now.
Okay, let's be clear here as we begin discussing this piece. First of all, I do not condone violence of any kind against abortion providers. I know as I was growing up in my teenage years and early 20s, I believe there were at least one, if not a few, abortion clinic bombings, and the people that took responsibility were like, we're stopping abortion at the root by getting rid of these abortion clinics, and they justified their actions. I don't think those actions were justified, nor do I think the actions of an organization like Operation Rescue, who took it to the extent of actually chaining themselves to the door of a Planned Parenthood, was justified. But what we heard about in the Biden administration was people being arrested for peacefully protesting. And not only that, is that even if perchance you have to bring someone in for questioning on a pro-life matter, the last thing you should be doing is storming their house with a SWAT team. We're not talking about a violent offender. We're not talking about someone who hurt kids. We're talking about someone who stood up for their morals and stood up for life and was subjected to this horrible practice of bringing in a whole SWAT team to deal with them, when in fact, by nature, they would be among the more compliant defendants to be arrested if they needed to be. But from what it appears from this report, the vast majority, at least, of these people who were targeted by the Biden DOJ were not doing anything illegal. We're not doing anything worthy of arrest. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would question is, why is the Department of Justice providing any information to Planned Parenthood? They are admitting by this practice, which was discovered through this study, which became this recent report, that they were leaking information to the pro-abortion side so that they would know who to look out for. And I'm sorry, but that is not the job of any justice system. The job of a justice system is to look at the laws as they are on the books and enforce them as such. And, you know, we talk a lot about protests on this podcast. And I talk to you a lot about the fact that peacefully protesting should be allowed and is in fact a very important part of being an American. And then we discuss the difference between a peaceful protest and a riotous protest. It is my position that whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, if you engage in a riotous protest, you should be dealt with harshly. Because the goal of protesting is not to cause chaos. The goal of protesting is to peacefully assemble and proclaim your message. And if you believe in the message that you're proclaiming, then you will do it peacefully, because the goal is to change hearts and minds. The goal isn't simply to grandstand and say, hey, I have the right message here and you're wrong, and I'll do everything I can to prove I'm right, even if it alienates you. that's not our goal. At least it shouldn't be our goal. Our goal is to love people. The Bible says that they will know we are Christians by our love for one another. We need to love the woman who's considering an abortion. We need to seek to understand why she's considering abortion. Is it wrong no matter what the reason? Yes. But if we can seek to understand the reason, then hopefully they can see by our actions and by the way we interact with them that we actually love them and we want what's best for them and their baby. I like the phrase I've been hearing more and more lately from the pro-life movement, which is our goal isn't to make abortion illegal. Our goal is to make abortion unthinkable. As a matter of fact, just today, before I sat down to record this podcast, I saw a clip from Bill Maher, who is by no means a conservative, but he said, I don't understand pro-life laws that limit abortion in certain states because either abortion is wrong or it's not. And he has said many times that he's not convinced abortion is wrong, but he is saying, along with many of us who are pro-life, that if your position is that all human life is valuable and that abortion is an absolute atrocity against living beings that God created, then why is there pro-life states and pro-choice states? If it's a moral issue, it should be all pro-life states. And I completely agree with that. However, I also do not agree with people who are in the official abolish abortion movement because many times they poo-poo any efforts by pro-lifers to limit the scope of abortion. And in my opinion, a limited scope of abortion is still representative of a life saved, and that is something worth celebrating. But I definitely do believe that abortion should be ended in all states. And here's the kicker that I struggle with understanding. I mean, I understand it, but at the same time, I don't. And that is this. So often when pro-choicers corner pro-lifers at like campus events or other places where they're speaking, they're like, well, what is the 10-year-old girl supposed to do if she gets raped and she gets pregnant? Which, first of all, that's an outlying scenario that doesn't happen every day. But even if we were to concede that it does, as Charlie Kirk was so good at pointing out, if you had an ultrasound of that 10-year-old's baby and you had an ultrasound of the baby of someone who had been praying for years for that baby and that baby was conceived in love, and you looked at both of those ultrasounds, you wouldn't be able to tell a difference. So that's the first thing. But the second thing along these lines is if you ask someone who brings up the rape and incest exceptions to you, would they go along with bans on abortion that ban everything else except for rape and incest? And most of the time, they say no. So their point of bringing up that argument wasn't really out of a moral concern. It was more out of the fact that by flashing the rape and incest exception, you keep the toe in the door for the rest of abortion. And the bottom line here, folks, is that God creates human life. There are people that are together for years and are never able to conceive. So ultimately, it's God that chooses to place a baby into a womb. And whether that baby comes to be by rape, incest, or love, it is still an intended baby by Almighty God. And I have a good friend who was conceived in rape, and she is no less human than anyone else. And I always tell people, I was born in the second trimester, and I was no less human the day I was born than someone born full term. humanity is not defined by the circumstances of one's conception. Humanity is instead defined by the fact that God creates life and that he intends for that life to live and to thrive. And ultimately the hope is that they would come to know their Creator in a personal way and accept Jesus and his sacrifice and atonement for their sins. And that is why this issue is so important and why every Christian should not be afraid to discuss it. Because the very reason that it is such a big deal today to be able to abort your child, to end your child's life, is because we face a battle against the devil that hates human life. And the reason that he hates human life is because human life is made in the image of Almighty God. Remember, God says in Genesis chapter 1, it's the first instance of the Trinity. He says, "Let us make man in our image and after our likeness." And then it goes on to talk about how we were given dominion over the earth. And I feel like it's very clear that in today's culture, we have it backwards. We're constantly being ridiculed as a society for how we treat the earth. And before I go any further, let me just say, I believe that Christians should treat the earth well. I believe that we should be good stewards of the resource of this earth. So there's nothing wrong with caring about the environment and being a Christian. However, the Bible does warn us about the propensity of mankind to worship the creation rather than the Creator. And I think we're seeing that full force today, and I hope that we as believers can help people bring that back into balance. And I hope that we can lovingly engage specifically on this issue of life in the society that we live in the circles that God has us placed in. There's an old song that says, "Brighten the corner where you are." And if I could encourage you today, I would say, please strive to brighten the corner where you are and to speak positively about life. Because without the right to life, there are no other rights. To me, this is the greatest irony. Like, everybody goes on and on about the rights that they should have as an American, or even whether illegal immigrants should have rights. But the ultimate reality is, if you don't have life, you have no rights. And that's something that we all need to be aware of, and we need to be able to bring up regularly as we seek to engage this culture for the Lord Jesus Christ and bring the darkness into light. So as we continue on, the next story that I want to talk about is the latest firestorm that Trump stirred up by posting an AI photo that was made of him.
Welcome back to Special Report. Joining us again, the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance. Pope Leo has expressed problems with the war in Iran, says that we should be peacemakers, been very vocal. The president took to Truth Social saying Leo should be thankful because, as everyone knows, he was a shocking surprise. He wasn't on any list to be Pope, was only put there because the church, because he was an American, they thought he would be good, best way to deal with President Donald J. Trump. If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican. Just wondering, as a Catholic, how you consider this Truth Social post, and then the post of the picture, which a lot of people took as the president posting a picture of himself as Jesus. He later said that he posted it as thinking as a doctor saving people.
I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support, and only the fake news could come up with that one.
But it really caused a kerfuffle, Mr. Vice President. I'm just wondering what you make of all of this, and whether it's what you think of this back and forth with the church.
Well, first of all, Brett, I think the president was posting a joke, and of course he took it down because he recognized that a lot of people weren't understanding his humor in that case. I think the president of the United States likes to mix it up on social media, and I actually think that's one of the good things about this president is that he's not filtered. He doesn't send everything through a communications professional. He actually reaches out directly to the people. You know, when it comes to the disagreements with the Vatican, look, we're going to have disagreements, Brett, from time to time. I think it's a good thing, actually, that the Pope is advocating for the things that he cares about, but we're always going to have disagreements on matters of public policy, or I should say sometimes we're going to have disagreements on matters of public policy. The Pope has been critical of our immigration policy, but ultimately the immigration policy of the United States is set by Donald Trump. The Pope is going to have disagreements on other issues. We can respect the Pope. We certainly have a good relationship with the Vatican, but we're also going to disagree on substantive questions from time to time. I think that's a totally reasonable thing. It isn't particularly newsworthy.
Do you think that when the president says it's hurting him very badly, catering to the radical left, it's hurting the Catholic Church, do you agree with the president there?
Well, look, I think the president has the prerogative to set American foreign policy. He's got the prerogative to set American immigration policy. He has to look out for the interests of the United States of America. And that inevitably means that when the Vatican comments on issues of public policy, sometimes there's going to be agreement, of course, and sometimes there's going to be disagreement. I think that's a reasonable thing, Brett. I don't think that it's particularly newsworthy, but I certainly think that in some cases it would be best for the Vatican to stick to matters of morality, to stick to matters of what's going on in the Catholic Church, and let the President of the United States stick to dictating American public policy. But when they're in conflict, they're in conflict. I don't worry about it too much, Brett. I think it's a natural thing. I'm sure it'll happen in the future, and it's not that big of a deal that it happened in the past.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to say about this clip is I think that Donald Trump does like to troll people, and in my understanding from the research that I've done and the things that I've read about this photo is, first of all, it is AI. Second of all, it was created by someone else. And third of all, I do not think that it was intended to be Trump being Jesus. Now, that being said, whether he's portraying Jesus or whether he's trolling the Pope, as some people have said, I don't think it's appropriate. I've said this before, but I think that if Trump would spend less time on social media and more time simply focusing on the issues at hand for America, that would be better. But I think also he knows exactly what he's doing when he posts these things. He knows that people are going to be upset, and he wants to get a rise out of people. And I think that that is very sad, because he's the leader of the free world, and he has an opportunity to do good things, and he has done good things for America. So why he insists on trolling people, I don't know. But for the second part of this, when JD Vance talks about the Pope's positions versus the positions of the administration, I have to wonder. And I had this question through the whole previous administration as well. And that is, I know that a large number of Catholics are extremely conservative in their views. I don't know if I could say a majority. I haven't done enough study about them to know if that's the case. But I know that large numbers of them are. So my question would be, how can you revere a pope who doesn't take conservative stances on things? Now, my understanding is that in a lot of ways, Pope Leo has been more conservative than the previous pope, but I still do wonder about that. And on the issue of Iran, I would simply say to the Pope, I don't think it's an issue of people wanting to go to war. You know, a lot of liberals in particular who are anti-war will say conservatives just want war. And they'll get all up in arms about why would you want war? But I think the reality is that war is inevitable when you live in a sin-sick and fallen world. And we have to remember that the regime that President Trump is fighting against is an evil regime, a regime that has killed its own people en masse. And so one of my biggest issues is if you're going to be mad at Donald Trump for his actions in Iran, were you mad at the leadership who killed their own people? See, because this is the disconnect that's so difficult to take, is so many liberals will support extremely violent cultures, and they'll think it's totally okay. Like in the last several months when liberals supported Hamas and had a pride flag by their office at the same time that they're supporting Hamas, but Hamas wants to kill homosexuals. They don't have sympathy for that lifestyle, so it is totally antithetical to support them. And yet they do. And I think that for a lot of people, they don't understand the intricacies of what is going on. By the same token, I would say that just because America does take action, that makes it the right action automatically. I do think that scrutiny is okay, but I think that we need to understand that it's not as simple as saying if you go to war, that means that you like war. I can guarantee you that if you polled our American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and you asked them if they liked war, the vast majority of them would say no. But they sign up with a willingness to go to war to preserve our nation. And the reality is that America has been able to be a beacon of justice for others around the world. Do we have to solve everyone's problems? No. But I think it is important to note that previous administrations have spoken out against the evils of what is going on in Iran. But Trump finally took action, and many people say that it is action that is long overdue. So I hope that if you criticize this endeavor, that you at least seek to understand the side you disagree with. Because I don't think it's as simple as we like war and you don't. Because as long as there have been sinful people, war has been a reality in the world. That is just the facts. So as I wrap up the show, I wanted to share with you something that has been a favorite thing of mine for a long time. A clip from my very favorite episode of the Andy Griffith Show. I call it the Woodshed episode. And I really like the way that Andy deals with a spoiled kid and deals with Opie's response. And I like the contrast between Andy as a father who's willing to discipline his son and this other father who struggles to do so, but then in the end realizes that it's the right thing.
Are there rules for how Pa should treat his son if he's a kid? Is that nowadays kids get 75 cents a week allowance instead of 25 cents.
75 cents? That's a lot of money. You want it straight, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here it goes. There are no rules for pa's and sons, and I think it's best for you to get a quarter and work for it. You see, when you give something, in this instance cleaning the garage, and you get something in return, like a quarter, well, that's the greatest feeling in the world. You do feel good after working, don't you?
Uh-huh. Good and tired.
Well, as you get bigger, while you'll be doing more and more work for more and more return, and that good feeling will get bigger. You understand what I mean?
I think so.
Good.
I'm not going to get the 75 cents. Talking is a waste of time. You have to take action. Action? Sure. What kind of action? Temper tantrums. Why? To scare them. Shake them up a little bit. Have you ever held your breath swimming under the raft? No, I mean at home, to get something you want. Sounds kind of spiteful. Listen, it works. Your face gets kind of red, and your jaws get tight, and oh boy, do they get scared. They think you're going to get seriously sick, or maybe even bust a vessel. Gee. Oh yeah, there's all kinds of them. Kicking a table leg, rolling around on the floor, kicking your feet, pretending you can't stop crying. Gosh, I don't know. Oh, for crying out loud, Taylor. Hey, Arnold. Take it easy, Arnold. I didn't mean to say nothing wrong. I'm sorry, Arnold. I'm sorry. Get the idea?
Oh, watch it.
Doggone it, I warned him, and he deliberately rode on the sidewalk again.
Is that true, son? Did you hear Officer Fife warn you?
Yes, sir.
What'd you do it again for?
Because I wanted to.
But I expect you'll know we're not fooling when we take this bike and keep it for a week or two.
You'll see. I'll tell my father.
Good, good. You tell him to come right on down and we'll talk about it. What?
None of the other guys work for their allowance.
I thought we had this all thrashed out before.
We did.
Well, why bring it up again?
'Cause
No work, no allowance.
that's not fair.
Don't raise your voice to me. Opie, I asked you what you're doing.
I was holding my breath.
Opie, what are you doing now?
I'm crying and I can't stop.
What are you doing now?
I was having a tantrum.
Well, don't get your clothes all dirty.
Do it. I demand you return that bike, and now.
Now, you look here. You're that boy's father. You're responsible for his actions. Now, he's too young to be locked up. But if you're not going to take responsibility, maybe I ought to lock you up. You ever think of that?
Come on, put him in jail. He won't care. He's tough.
You want me to lock your father up?
He ain't afraid of you.
Sheriff, there won't be any need to impound that bike.
How's that?
I'd like to have it. I want to sell it.
Sell it. You're going to sell my bike?
That's right, Arnold.
But it's my bike.
I say, would you like to continue this in quiet? There's a real nice woodshed out back.
Woodshed?
Mm-hmm.
Good old-fashioned woodshed?
Real nice one.
Come on, Arnold.
No, I want my bike. Aren't you going to get spanked, Paul?
Don't you think he deserves it?
I don't want to say. After all, he is one of my own kind.
So there you have one of my favorite classic clips from the Andy Griffith Show. And one of the things I've always appreciated about the Andy Griffith Show is that it was done in a time when every episode had a moral and you could come away from it realizing that you learned a good lesson. And I love the fact that they actually mention a woodshed in this episode because the Bible talks about how important it is for parents to discipline their children. Now, of course, they are not to discipline them in wrath, but they are to discipline them. They are to teach them the right way to live life. And on reflecting on this scene, I am so thankful for parents that taught me the correct way to live life. My parents taught me delayed gratification. They taught me to save up money for the things that I wanted. And they taught me that I would appreciate something more if I saved up for it than if I had been just given it out of hand. One example that comes to my mind is that when I was in college, I was paying for every class. So I knew that if I didn't pass the class, that would be money wasted on my part because I was paying for it. Conversely, I knew of someone around that time or maybe slightly after I graduated. I forget exactly when we met. But she got the opportunity because she was an American Indian, to go to an expensive school free of charge. And she literally said, I went to school and I partied the entire semester and I didn't do well in my classes. And I really thought a lot about that contrast to where she didn't have any expenses, but she also didn't have a stake in the game. And so I think it is important for us to have a stake in the game. And, you know, I've talked a lot on the Culture Watch podcast about the fact that the whole idea of the American Democratic Republic is that we take responsibility for our actions. And yet we've raised a whole generation plus of individuals who have not learned how to take responsibility for their actions. And entitled kids become entitled adults. And we've pushed maturity farther and farther up the chain. I know for a while there were news stories coming out every few years about how you're not mature until you're 25, or you're not mature until you're 30. You know, life is a growing experience. It's a journey, and we should be maturing more and more every day. But we don't do our kids any favors by allowing them to use their youth as an excuse to do foolish things. And even the very term teenager, which was coined by Reader's Digest in the 1940s, I believe is largely an excuse to do foolish things. The Apostle Paul said that when he was a child, he thought as a child, he understood as a child, and he behaved as a child. But then he said, when I became a man, I put away childish things. And in the Bible, we see reflected only childhood and manhood. We don't see the idea of a teenager. Now, does that mean that as soon as someone becomes a teenager, that they should be expected to be a fully formed, mature adult who makes no mistakes? No. But if we raise the standard and we say to our young teens, you are a young adult, and now is the time that you start acting like an adult, we actually begin to prepare them for when they reach full adulthood. Because adulthood isn't something that happens where you're a kid at 17 and then you go to bed one day at 17 and wake up as a fully formed, fully responsible adult. No, adulthood is something that you should ease into and grow each day so that by the time you are a fully grown adult, you're ready for the responsibilities thereof. And so I think that we need to get away from the soft bigotry of low expectations and instead raise the bar. Because if you have low expectations for someone, they may hit them every time, but they won't grow. They won't become better people. If you have high expectations constantly, they may miss, but even in the missing, they will still grow and thrive and ultimately be better people. Something to think about as you go through this week. Well, that's all I have to share with you on today's edition of the Culture Watch podcast. I hope that if you have enjoyed it and derived benefit from it, that you will share it with your family and friends, and maybe pick 3 to 5 people who have never heard of the ministry of Speaking for Him and encourage them to give us a listen or a watch. I would truly appreciate it. As I said before, you can leave your comments, questions, or concerns with the contact information that will run at the end of the show, specifically your voicemails. I really do want to hear from you, and I'd love to share voicemails on a future episode of the show. With all that being said, I hope you have a wonderful week, and keep serving the best of masters.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Your host has been Andrew Gommesen, founder of Speaking for Him. For information on today's show and to leave us comments and voicemails, please visit Speaking for Him. That is speaking numeral for him.blogspot.com. You can find Andrew's ministry at speakingforhim.com. That's speaking the number 4 HIM.com. And when you look for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or all other major podcast platforms, let us know what you think of the podcast by leaving a rating and a review. Intro music for this podcast is provided by Audio Kraken. Transition music is provided by Superstate. Both of these tracks are available free of charge from pond5.com, pond5.com.